Welcome back, man. It's the Dab Podcast. I've been going for about 2 years now, but I've still been moving and still doing a lot of things. And everyone kept asking me, when am I coming back? When am I coming back? Well, I haven't had a reason to till now. I gotta shout out my man Jaden Pena because he told me about this guy, and me from Rhode Island, I didn't know him. And then after that, I started reading, doing a little bit of research, and I found out this man's making moves that people need to know about. And everyone I go ask people who I talk to, they're asking me, why are you bringing back for Gabe Amo? Why are you bringing back for Gabe Amo? So many people wanted to come on. And all I gotta say is when you get to know the person and you see the way Jaden lights up when he talks about him, you understand. I've talked to him in a brief conversation, and he was one of the realest people I ever met. Just talking, he talked to me like I was a person. And yeah, he's got, a big week coming up, but all that, if you want to like the political person, there's other podcasts for that. And I always love starting off my podcast with the one big question I got to know is, who is Gabe Amo? And I got the person here to answer that question. So who is Gabe Amo?
Look, first off, it is an honor to be on the Dab podcast, helping to bring it back, but bringing it back like it never left.
That's right.
As LL Cool J said, don't call it a comeback.
I love it.
And, first and foremost, I'm a son of Rhode Island. I'm a product of Pawtucket. I grew up in the streets of Woodlawn, spending a lot of my time, going to Payne Park, playing Little League at Morley Field and Woodlawn Little League. Playing actually, stickball in the Baldwin parking lots. My life was walking to and from church as an altar server, to really just being a member of a community that cared a lot about me. So my parents, born in two different West African countries, my dad from Ghana, my mom from Liberia. And they're both hardworking people. Everybody's parents hardworking, doing what they need to do to provide. And my dad first owned a liquor store in Pawtucket off of Mineral Spring Avenue, Liquor City. And then he went over to Olneyville, where he has had a store since 1995.
I grew up in Olneyville, so I probably passed it a whole bunch of times.
Oh, you probably did. So it's the corner of Hartford and Marino. So actually, it's probably more Silver Lake than it is Olneyville, but further down past the Hartford projects in that direction. And then my mom's been a nurse in nursing homes. And then I've got a big family. My parents actually weren't married. They both got married subsequent to being together and having me. But I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters and a ton of cousins, because before my mom came to this country, she had her 3 siblings, my Uncle Daniel, my Aunt Regina, my Uncle Edward here. And then after her, a ton of her brothers and sisters who came from Liberia. My grandparents, so my maternal grandmother had 13 children. So most of them actually ended up here. So less neat on my dad's side, but I have a boatload of play cousins. If you've seen a Ghanaian American or Liberian American, there's a very good chance that I would call them my cousin, or their parents my aunt and uncle, mostly out of respect, but that's just like culturally, how it is. So that's that is who I am. Because I think that's a good place to start, because I think your origin story, where you come from, is a huge part of your who and also your why. And that why is helping people in public service. And we could talk about that, but that is a foundational piece that I think it's important that people know.
See, like with me, the main reason I started the podcast was during COVID, and my son loved watching YouTube, was 9. I'm like, why are you watching this family making millions of dollars? You're sitting here. He goes, because they're famous and they do a lot of cool stuff. I'm like, there's people in Rhode Island doing good things too. He's like who? So I started having people come on for Rhode Island, because my son's pretty much the epitome of Rhode Island. He's Cape Verdean, he's Puerto Rican, and he's black. So he's got a little bit of it all. So I wanted people of different demographics to come on. And then knowing that there's people who expanded and went outside of Rhode Island. And when I told him you was coming on, I mentioned that you worked with Obama. His eyes lit up, because that's a name that you say Obama, you say Biden, you say White House to a 9-year-old, they're thinking that's the furthest place in the world. So when you walked out of Rhode Island, a lot of people thinking you leave Rhode Island, you never come back. You leave Rhode Island, you either stay in Rhode Island forever or you leave and you never come back. So you've done the opposite. So what was that like? First, the transition out and now the transition back in.
Yeah, so if honestly never really felt like a transition. When you have a family as big as mine and you have ties as big as mine, right? So I spent essentially the first 22 years of my life in Rhode Island because
Mhm.
I went to high school. I went from kindergarten to eighth grade, St. Mary's School in Pawtucket on George Street. I went to high
Okay.
school at Moses Brown. I went to college at Wheaton in Norton, Massachusetts, which if you're just basically going to
Same
Gillette
thing.
Stadium, it basically might as well be Rhode Island. And I kept my residence essentially in Rhode Island. I was the best roommate to have in college because I was
Never
never there.
there.
I
Yeah.
was I was always doing something politically here. And
Mhm.
so you see, I spent essentially my first 22 years of my life here in Rhode Island. So when I left, I've only left for three reasons. One, to go to grad school at Oxford in the UK. I won something called a Marshall Scholarship that goes to 40 Americans every year. It's a gift from the UK government to the US for the Marshall Plan to help rebuild Europe.
Okay.
The second time I left was to work for President Obama at the White House and on his reelection campaign in Chicago. The third time was to work for President Biden at the White House this last few years up until 4 months ago. So when I say I haven't left, really, that you got the first 22 years, and then in between the presidents, I worked for Gina Raimondo when she was a governor of this state. So that's another 4+ years that I was here. So essentially 26 plus years of my life have been in Rhode Island. And when I've left, it's only been to work for a president of the United States or study in the UK. So the transition has always been seamless, right?
Mhm.
Because even when I'm not here, I'm in the mix, whether it's seeing how PC's doing, in the basketball season, or checking in on the local news or the political news of the day. I feel like in my appetite and consumption of media, when I'm not in Rhode Island, I probably even pay
Yeah.
more attention, right? So it's been phenomenal, and working for President Obama, walking into the White House, working for President Biden, walking into the White House is always surreal. It should
Mhm.
never be normal because this is a different way of existing and carrying out government because the scale is so massive. You're talking about the 330 plus million people of this country that you are contributing to people's lives around the country in your tiny little way, and sometimes bigger ways.
Yeah.
I've had the opportunity to do it in bigger ways. So yeah, it's surreal, but um, I always remember where I come from, so it makes that transition easy when I come back home. I never forget where I'm from.
'Cause I still remember when Obama first got inaugurated, we made sure we were down there. So we were down there for the inauguration, and
Oh yeah,
it
it was
was
a
just,
cold day too. You
oh, it
remember?
was very cold. It was a very cold day. But has there ever been a time when you're sitting at that table and you ever ask yourself, why me?
Yes, all the time. But
Hmm.
but I always have an answer to the why me.
Why is
The
that?
the answer is because I have been given these gifts and I owe a great debt to get the job done. Right.
Hmm.
So like as sometimes it's corny, right? But you feel like you've been put in a position, so you have to succeed. That failure is not an option.
Yeah.
And so when it's why me, it's because someone believes that I can get the job done. And that's why I feel like it is not too awesome of a responsibility to be at the heights of government. In fact, it's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Hmm. I know, like with me having an 11-year-old now, the world's like we just got back from Disney for the first time.
Oh yeah, I went to Disney for the first time for a 30th birthday
Oh
just a
wow!
few years ago.
And we went. It was his first time flying, and I'm in the airport. I'm everywhere, and I don't have that bubble feeling. But he
Yeah.
could just stop so many people looking around, and because he's never left Rhode Island.
Mhm.
So taking him down there, just the airport, Disney, Universal, everything, it was just a whole new world. So how do you think it is like DC is huge, Rhode
Yeah.
Island is this small state, but yet the goal is still the same.
Yeah. That's huge. That's, the first time I actually went to DC was the first time I flew on a plane as a semi-adult. When I was 17 years old, I won a scholarship that basically for two kids from Rhode Island and two kids from every state got to go be part of something called the United States Senate Youth Program. And you spend the week meeting with your U.S. senators. At that time, it was Jack Reed and Lincoln Chafee. You go to the Pentagon, which is the fascinating thing to me about the Pentagon was the fact that they got a shopping mall and have dry cleaners, and they have, because I'd never been in a space like that. You go to the department, the State Department. We had lunch in the secretary's dining room. You go to the White House. I met President George W. Bush at the time. So the first time I was on a plane what was like that. And so when you think about going that first trip, like you talk about your son going to Disney World, your first trip, going to a place like that, it alters your brain chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, I think that was another piece of inspiration for me to go back. And DC is a big city, but in many ways, it's like Rhode Island, because especially when you're in the government politics business, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
And the higher you go up on the ladder, there's a multiple of people that you have met in your existence. And that's what can make, you really effective, right? The thing about me is, because of those two stints in Washington, I know a lot of people in the executive branch and over in Congress, and people who do government relations, and people who do more social service type things, have gotten to meet a lot of people in different sectors. And that in a small city, and like Rhode Island, if once people start knowing your name, that can be a good thing or a bad thing, but you start to build a brand, right? And it's very important in politics because it's a relationship-oriented business. Government's a relationship-oriented business, that you build a good brand. It's the only way that you go up. It's the only way that you thrive, is that people trust you, know your word is your bond, and know that you have an ability to deliver when called upon. And so, when I am in DC, it does feel big sometimes, but if you're in the game of politics and government, people actually are not as numerous as it may seem.
And it's still crazy because I work for one of the largest law firms in Rhode Island, and my wife works for a different law firm, another big ones, and we're probably two of the only minorities in both the firms.
Oh, wow.
And people ask me about that. And I was like, I see my coworkers as they're just people. I don't see them as race or anything else. So when I go and I mingle with people, there's a lot of times when I may be the only minority in the room, but to me, that's my coworker. That's this first name. I've never seen race as the number of people in any room. So I know for you going down there, where DC is very diverse, but
Very diverse. Yeah.
very diverse. But making that trip to the UK, how was that?
Yeah, so it was a surreal experience. I would say even more surreal sometimes in Washington, because you got culturally, right, a different country. But then you also have a subculture of the University of Oxford that has its own traditions, right? So some of the oldest universities in the world, all right, are based out there. In fact, the college that I went to, so the way Oxford is made up is made of a bunch of, I think it's 30 some odd constituent colleges. So when you go, you're a member of the university, but you are also a member of a college. So my college was Merton College, Merton, and it competes for being one of the oldest institutions of learning in the world, with two other colleges there, University College and Balliol College. And they have all these old traditions, like they have something called High Table, where you, like, it looks like Harry Potter. And in fact,
To say that, yeah.
they did film part of Harry Potter at my college and the college next door to it, where you wear, a suit, white shirt, white bow tie, and you wear a gown over. And that's when you sit with the fellows of the college. And then they have, a 3-course meal. And then they have after desserts. And sometimes there's even second desserts. I mean, it is just a wild existence. And it was a privilege to do it, but you also recognize how there are some parts of tradition that you may not want to hold on to. Like sometimes you think, why do we need all of that if we're
Yeah.
going to learn? And the most important bit was the people around the world that I saw, scholars in their fields who are now scholars, now younger scholars who are now in their field, some people who are in government, some people who are in law, some people who are in business, who are in the social sector, transforming, coming up with ideas. This, it is one of the most remarkable networks that I've been able to be part of, and hopefully we'll get to stay in touch with those people. And if I do go to Congress, being able to tap into their knowledge. But like the UK, there's some old buildings. Like we look at the old buildings we have here. There's some old buildings. Sometimes you touch the walls and you're like, wow, this is really old.
Mm-hmm.
This is from like 1400, 1500. It's so it's wild. And when you're there as a Black person, you think about, wow, there was a time where I could not be here. you
Mm-hmm.
know and that applies to a lot of places,
A
but
lot of
the
places.
older the place is, the more you are conscious of that privilege that you have by being there, and you want to take advantage of the opportunity to be fully present and to know that it is something that you should value and make sure you put to use for yourself and for your community.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, just like touching in and looking up a little about yourself, everyone wants to go to Wiki. I think you could tell a lot about a person by how big their Wiki is and how big their ego is. And when someone doesn't have to say it, they show it. I think that just reigns even more. And the fact that you've done had all these accomplishments, but you ain't got to post them. You just go out and you move in silence. But when you have other people whose wikis got to be so long and donate to this and do all this, what gives you that humility to just move in silence like that?
Well, look, I try to be humble. I think one of the greatest attributes that anybody can have is to be humble. Quote to quote Kendrick. Sit down,
Hmm.
because look, at any moment there's someone who is doing more than you, who is more talented than you, who is smarter than you, more eloquent, more loved, more respected. There is always something more out there. All I can do every day is be the best me. Now, I don't know where that will land me at the end of the day. But every single day I try to be the best me. And some days I come up short. And you should actually bake into your analysis of yourself that not every day is going to be a good day. There are going to be some days that are harder than others, some days where you will go back home and wish that day had not happened. But the only great thing about this life, and most certainly we can't take for granted, is that uh, more often than not, there's a tomorrow, right? More often than not, there's a way and an ability to improve on what you did before, or not even improve, start anew,
Hmm.
right? Every single day is a new chance at that. And so when I think about my life and I think about all the things that I've done, I know that tomorrow is more important than yesterday. While it's important to know the past, because past is often prologue, it's often the beginning of the script, you can start with a blank page. And
Yeah.
so all these accomplishments that I've had, or any of the people in my world have, the next day someone may not care about them, may not be relevant. They want to see you in this moment for who you are. And if you don't approach life with some level of humility, it's going to be hard, because every day won't be big successes. Some days, it is hard to put your head down and just do the work. And it is one of the aspirations I have every day, is to be humble. Sometimes you talk to my team, the people who work with me, and sometimes like, Gabe, that's a crazy thing you just said. Because sometimes you feel proud, but pride absent some self-awareness, right,
Mhm.
is only something that'll make you topple. And so I try to be self-aware, but I'm not a perfect person. And I think we all should start with that tomorrow, we can work on ourselves, and be better every day.
I know another thing too was like me working with the youth and my football programs I have. There's a few people I gotta shout them again. I mentioned in the beginning, but Jaden is a great dude,
Remarkable young man.
And I see the way he light up when he talk about you. So I knew that you'd be A1. But who's that person that gave you that motivation growing up?
It's funny you say that. I had so many great role models growing up. It starts with the hard work and the work ethic of my parents. And people, the teenage years, those early years, sometimes it's hard. You're like, oh, mom, dad, I got this. But then you sit and think, wait, how did you get all of that done? How did you do it? And I'm not a parent. Hopefully one day I get to be one. And I would want my kids to look to me and say, all right, well, he works hard, so I should too. Yeah. Right. When I look at the teachers I had, so many of them said, Gabe, you're going places. Gabe, you'll be president one day. Now, I'm never going to run for president. but they said to me so many times along the way, keep going, even when I came up short, even when I failed, even when it looked like, sometimes I was moving in a zigzag, right, instead of a straight line. I think of all of them. I look at so many of the inspirational leaders I've had a chance to work for. When I talk about Barack Obama, the thing that I care most about, right, is resilience, right? People who have come back, who have had shortfalls or shortcomings and bounce back. That's the measure of a human being to me. And I think about, the circumstances you have, when he first ran for Congress, he lost. People said he took on too much, and then just literally 4 years later, he made moves to the Senate. 4 years after that, he's the president of the United States. Now, that's inspirational. But when I look at the role models I have, I have so many. I'm going to leave people out. I'm just going to make me look bad. But I think about the all of the people who gave me rides all over. When you're young, yeah. I probably could have walked a little bit more, but all the people who did so many things. My high school advisors, who enabled me to believe in myself, to like run for student senate, or to join the football team, or be, I think about some of the coaches. They knew Gabe wasn't going to be an all-stater, but they let me hit the field, jam them up at the line playing cover two, let me get a couple of attempts, have the QBs throw to me.
You breaking away on the sideline?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. No, but I could catch a touchdown in the corner of the end zone if you just hit me right. So, but I think about so many people who've given me a shot. The people that I look up to, right? Frankly, I don't have role models in the traditional sense where I see somebody and I'm like, I want to be them. In fact, what I prefer in my life is surrounding myself with people who are good and good-hearted and inspire me, not necessarily through any specific words or actions, but their presence is a gift, and then allows me to move forward.
I know, in a weird way, because I grew up without my father really in my picture, and I always said if Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince would have been proud of me, I would have been good, because that's what it was. I was like the person, that fictional person sometimes, but it's so good that now there's so many more people locally who are doing things that my son could look up to, where before I couldn't think of somebody from Rhode Island that right off the bat he can recognize. And there's a lot of youth right now in Rhode Island. I got to shout out my guy Justin Denson from LaSalle, who's got a big football scholarship. He's doing great things on the field, but there's also people behind the scenes doing great things. So when you look back at Rhode Island, I think we mentioned it off the year, Smithfield just got that big win in the Little League.
Huge. I'm proud of those guys.
Very proud of those guys. When you think of Rhode Island, in 3 words, what's Rhode Island to you?
Home. It is resilient. And it's welcoming. It's welcoming. When you talk about our communities, right, from Woonsocket to Newport, I think Rhode Islanders are amongst the most friendly, welcoming people. Everybody's got a story from somewhere else. Like, even though if you look at the demographics, it may look one way, right? 70%, white, this and that, but you got to dive in deeper, right? You got to dive in deeper. 30% people of color, but you even look at the Black population, Cape Verdeans, other, Liberians, Ghanaians, Nigerians, right? You look at our Latino populations that are so diverse, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Colombians, Peruvians, Guatemalans. You look at our Portuguese community, you look at our historic Irish communities, our Italian American communities. The welcoming is there. The resilience is about great. Like economically, it is sometimes tough to be in Rhode Island, right? You hear people, you talk to the young people, I got to move to another state, I got to do this, I got to do that to maintain my way of life. People who are in Rhode Island commit to Rhode Island, they double down on Rhode Island, and if we pull together more, we'll make it better. And the first is it's home. It's home. It is an identifier of who I am. But so many people, one of my favorite things is when I'm anywhere in the world, really, I for real, I was in the Azores last September 1, having a conversation. Someone comes up to me and says, "You're from Rhode Island." I said, "How did you know?" It's like, I heard what you said about this. And it's like, wherever I go in the world, Rhode Island is a centerpiece for someone's life and someone's self-identity, so much so that if I travel to a foreign country and I don't see a Rhode Islander or something about Rhode Island, I think something wrong happened.
I know you're a very busy man. You got a big week coming up, and everything really starts today.
It
Before
does. First day of voting today.
today,
Until the Saturday before the election, people can go in person to vote at their city hall, except for Bristol. Bristol has another location, but you just go to vote.sos or vote.ri.gov, vote.ri.gov. And everybody should study. I would love everybody's support, but you should study. Look at the experience that everybody has. Look at how forward-looking people are, and look at their souls, look at their biographies, look at their background, right, and see how that connects to who you are in this election. But today it starts, and the last day to vote is September 5th. And so if anybody wants to know about me or my campaign, you can go to gabeamo.com, sign up. We'll send you emails. You can come out and help. But I encourage everybody to get involved, because this is a big decision. This is somebody who is going to serve in Congress and represent our state. And that is one of the highest honors I think anybody can have in government, especially in Rhode Island.
yeah, real quick, if you can, because a lot of people, when I talk about, Congress and you running, and it was like, so if he's running for Congress and he has one vote, or he has two votes, or whatever else, what does my vote mean?
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah,
see
look.
in that person?
So look, it's 435 people in the U.S. House of Representatives, right? The majority right now is held by the Republicans. They only have a 5-vote advantage, right? So they have 223 seats in the House, and Democrats have the remainder. But essentially, what this means, right, is that even though they have a majority, there are ways that we can affect a change, right? You can go down there as a congressperson, as a Democrat, go try to build bridges with some Republicans. We can go down there and vote to keep the government funded. That would be a tragedy if we couldn't. So every vote matters in that instance. So I wouldn't just look at it as, the votes at this point or another, determine everything. You also look at what a congressperson can do in bringing resources back home, right? Even if you don't have a vote, you can get things in the legislation. They call them congressionally designated spending or designated funds that you can go and get fund projects, community centers, health centers, community programs. That doesn't need to go through the normal process that might be at the state level or otherwise. So that's an important thing. And then the last thing is constituent services. You may have a problem that you need help with. Your family member can't get their SSI benefits. Your family is traveling and you can't get a passport. Your colleague is looking for information on navigating Washington, D.C. or wants to get a tour. All these are the things a congressperson can do and be there and be your concierge. So I want to be there for people, right? Be there to serve their constituent needs, be there to bring back resources and bring back earmarks back to specific projects, and then be their voice and their vote. When you see me on the House floor, that's me speaking for all 550,000 people of the 1st Congressional District. That's not just my voice. I truly believe in being a trustee and a delegate of the people in Rhode Island.
My little special guest here, he's the original reason why the Dad podcast started.
Happening, man.
Hi.
So before you got to wrap up to this 11-year-old with a dream, I put him in front of a lot of important people. You're from Pawtucket. His favorite basketball player in the world is Jeff Xavier. Shout out Jeff.
Yeah, shout out to Jeff Xavier. I used to see him at Saints.
Yep, he's working with him every day. So for him chasing that dream, what advice you giving that 11-year-old from Rhode Island?
Never stop believing in your dreams. Don't let anybody take those dreams for you. I don't care what they are. I don't care how strange and far-flung they've seemed. Every single outcome starts with a dream. So don't ever lose your dream. And the thing I would say is the dream isn't going to just come to you. So you got to work for it. But if you start with the dream, I know you'll get there.
Yes, sir. One more before we go. And to that person that needs to find you and find out where to vote one more time, where can they get it?
Go to GabeAmo.com, GabeAmo.com, and to find out your polling information, your voter registration, go to vote.ri.gov.
I appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a very busy week. We want to get to know the person, man. We love what you're doing. Keep doing it. Any events coming up, man, let us know. We'll be there with the shirts on, ready to support.
I appreciate it. To be a guest on the Dad podcast is one of the best highlights I've had of this whole campaign. So I appreciate you. Thank you for the service you're offering our people. And I can't wait to see you soon.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you.